$5 trillion. That is the amount the Gulf countries must pay the United States of America to continue the war against Iran until the complete destruction of the regime in Tehran. But to stop the war, the US president is demanding $2.5 trillion. This statement is being circulated today by Arabic language media, citing Omani journalist Salem al-Jahuri, who is very close to the Omani authorities. But behind this message lies to some extent betrayal. Oman is effectively siding with Iran, betraying the United States. The fact is that Oman suddenly called for an urgent end to the war. The new leader of Iran, Khamenei, suddenly apologized specifically for the attacks on Oman and said that it was actually all the Americans, and stated that this definitely would not happen again. In Oman, they stated that Trump was deceived by Israel and drawn into the war, and most importantly, Iran and Oman. Oman is now developing a scheme to allow selected tankers to pass through the Hormuz Strait. Moreover, in Oman, they suddenly called on the Gulf countries to get rid of American military bases. That's why we definitely need to look into this issue very carefully. I'm Alex Ipici, let's discuss this together. But before we start, I want to ask you to support the work of this YouTube channel financially with your donation or a paid membership, or by becoming a member right now. Here on the YouTube platform, under this video, you need to click the join button, or you can use the QR code on your screens. This is actually the most convenient way to make a one-time donation. I will be grateful for any support you can give, but you can do this at the end of this episode. And also subscribe to my Telegram channel, Peachy News. The link is in the description of this video. There we post breaking news as it comes in. So, reports are circulating in Arabic language media today. We've been seeing this all day. A statement from Omani journalist Salem al-Jahuri, who is close to the country's authorities, claims that supposedly US President Donald Trump asked the Gulf countries to pay Americans $5 trillion. If they want the war against Iran to continue, and for the US and Israel to finally resolve the issue of the Iranian regime. Or the Gulf monarchies should pay $2.5 trillion if the GCC countries, the Gulf countries, want, on the contrary, to stop this war. The logic, supposedly, is that no matter which option the Gulf monarchies choose, they will still have to pay the Americans. US President Donald Trump, I should note, said on Friday that the goal of the war is not limited to changing the Iranian regime. He emphasized that the United States is working in coordination with its allies to achieve its security goals without entering into a prolonged conflict. In addition, Trump added, "The joint military pressure led by Washington along with Israel has caused significant damage to Iranian infrastructure, and the US is already prepared to wind down the military operation. On the other hand, there are increasing reports to the contrary, that the US is preparing to send ground troops to Iran as well." And in this light, the statement by the Omani journalist sounds, well, a bit exaggerated. At the moment, there is no other confirmation of such a demand from Trump. But Oman itself has been behaving extremely strangely for the past 3 days, and its behavior raises real concerns that this US ally seems to be turning away from Donald Trump. What is this about? The Minister of Foreign Affairs of Oman stated yesterday that Israel pushed the US into a serious miscalculation regarding aggression against Iran when supposedly a nuclear deal was within reach. Badr al-Bus'aidi, who acted as a mediator in the recent negotiations between the US and Iran aimed at resolving the nuclear issue, wrote today in an article published in The Economist that over the past 9 months, the US and Iran have twice been, quote, on the verge of reaching a real nuclear deal. But their plans were allegedly constantly thwarted by Israel. Well, I should note right away that al-Bus'aidi did not say exactly how Israel was disrupting any deal. Well, next I'll quote the head of the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Oman, al-Bus'aidi. So we were shocked but not surprised when, on February 28th, just a few hours after the latest and most substantive negotiations, Israel and America once again carried out an illegal military strike against a peace that for a while seemed quite attainable. Washington has lost control over its own foreign policy. It was Israel that convinced the US to start the war on the false premise that the Iranian government would offer unconditional surrender at the end of the war after the killing of the former leader of the Islamic Revolution, Ayatollah Sayyid Ali Khamenei. Of course, the biggest miscalculation of the American administration was that it allowed itself to be drawn into this war at all. This is not America's war, and it is unlikely that there is a scenario in which both Israel and America will benefit from this. Here, of course, it's worth remembering that Oman was the only one in the region who, on the first day of the war, called on the US to stop strikes against Iran, so such a position is hardly surprising. But then in Oman, they started talking in an even more dangerous way for the Trump administration. Al-Busaydi unexpectedly emphasized that the Arab countries that relied on cooperation with the US in the field of security now see such cooperation as a serious vulnerability threatening their current security and future prosperity. And right away, he hinted that they should stop cooperating with the United States in the field of security. He said, for example, if there were no American bases in, say, Saudi Arabia or Qatar, there wouldn't have been strikes from Iran. Maybe you should think about it. Maybe you don't need those American military bases. Besides, according to Busaydi, the interests of Israel, which seeks to overthrow the regime in Tehran, do not coincide with the interests of the US and the American people. Al-Busaydi noted that achieving Israel's goals would require a prolonged military campaign involving US ground troops, which would open a new front of endless wars. As a result, the Omani foreign minister stated that now Americans must ask Iran to return to the negotiating table. Quote, it will certainly not be easy for the Iranian leadership to return to dialogue with an administration that has twice abruptly switched from negotiations to bombings and assassinations. But the path to ending the war, no matter how difficult it may be for both sides, may lie precisely through the resumption of negotiations. The countries need an incentive to find the courage and start the dialogue again. But it seems that this was just the beginning of some behind-the-scenes game, because the day before, a written message was published in Tehran from the supposed supreme leader of Iran, Mojtaba Khamenei, in which he stated that the attacks that hit Oman and Turkey were actually attacks by the US and Israel. He claimed that Iran has never specifically attacked these countries. A quote from the address attributed to Mojtaba Khamenei, whom, I remind you, no one has seen or heard from since the beginning of the war. Quote, I emphasize that the attacks carried out against Turkey and Oman, both countries with which we have appropriate relations, were in no way committed by the armed forces of the Islamic Republic or by any other forces of the resistance movement. This is a trick of the Zionist enemy. And here is the climax of this behind-the-scenes game between Iran and Oman, which is the statement by Iran's Deputy Foreign Minister Vahid Jalalzadeh. Quote, if this war ends, we will definitely create a legal regime for the passage of tankers and ships in the Strait of Hormuz together with Oman. The fact that the Islamic Republic will create a new legal regime in the Strait of Hormuz is certain. We will definitely implement this regime with the help of the armed forces and Oman. So the behavior of Omani officials and journalists is quite understandable. And I think we will hear many more similar statements about the supposed $5 trillion in the coming days. And finally, I'll just try to make you smile a little, especially against the backdrop of such tense news. In the latest address attributed to the new leader of Iran, Mojtaba Khamenei assures that he recently personally visited Tehran. And during his stay in the capital of Iran, he rode anonymously in a taxi to hear the opinions of ordinary citizens. Supposedly, the Ayatollah dressed in the clothes of an ordinary commoner and listened among the people to what ordinary Iranians were saying on the streets. But there is one inconsistency. Since the first day of the war, no one has seen or heard Mojtaba Khamenei, and for some reason, all his addresses are released only in written form. So if Mojtaba was riding in a taxi dressed as a commoner and talking to ordinary people, then why doesn't he at least record a voice message? Fine, never mind the video address, but he could at least record a voice message. I'll leave it at that. Share your opinions and conclusions in the comments below this episode. Subscribe to the channel, hit the bell, and don't forget to like. And let me remind you that I would appreciate any support for this YouTube channel. All the links and details on how to do this are in the description of this video. That's all for now. Take care of yourselves. Goodbye, everyone.